Hey everybody, Miguel the Movie Encyclopedia here. Today I'm going to be discussing my top 10 best movies of 2019 list. Seems like a lot of other film critics are doing it on the internet, and I felt like it was time for me to give this a shot. A few rules before we start. One, this isn't going to be a list of the absolute best movies of 2019. These are just my personal favorite films of the year, and I'll be discussing the reason why I like them so much and why I think they were the best movies of 2019. Two, I haven't seen all the great movies of this year, so there will definitely be a few hits not on this list. And three, expect to see a few films that you won't be seeing on anybody else's top 10 list this year. Because, frankly, I'm a man of unique tastes. Sometimes. More or less. Anywho, let's start with the number 10 movie on my list, which is Shazam. What I really enjoyed about this movie was how the director set this apart from other superhero movies. I mean, in a year filled with superhero films, how do you set apart a movie like Shazam from all the other superhero movies that have come and gone over the last 10 years? You turn it into the very first superhero Christmas movie and make it as badass as possible. And that's exactly what Shazam was. I mean, Shazam is a very well written, hilarious, yet heartwarming and family oriented superhero movie that pushes all the right buttons, while at the same time, it also acts as a great Christmas comedy. The whole movie, including the flashbacks, are set in Christmas. I mean, this movie was so unprecedented and yet so great. It works as both a superhero movie and a Christmas movie. It was just an all-around really good film. Also, anyone who says Zachary Levi wasn't amazing in this movie as Shazam is a freaking idiot, because he was spectacular in this movie and the perfect choice for this lovable character. Alright, now for the number 9 movie on my list, which is Honey Boy. For years, we've wondered why child actors like Amanda Bynes, Corey Feldman, and Miley Cyrus became so volatile and destructive as adults. This movie gives us that answer for at least one of those ill-fated gems, Shia LaBeouf. The movie, loosely based off Shia LaBeouf's childhood, tells the story about his destructive and very volatile relationship with his abusive and drug-addicted father. The movie is loosely based on his life, and the result is an emotionally poignant film about the trauma that young children face with mentally unstable and abusive and addicted parents, and the forgiveness that is necessary to move on from this traumatic time in their lives. I was honestly surprised by just how good this movie actually ended up being, and I was really impressed by all the performances and the writing. Also, Shia LaBeouf gives one of the absolute best performances of his career. If he doesn't get a Best Supporting Actor nomination at the Oscars, I'm going to be royally pissed. Now for my number 8 film, Spider-Man Far From Home. After Avengers Endgame, I was not expecting anything great from Marvel Studios until 2020. But I was happily surprised by Spider-Man Far From Home, which gave us yet another great Spider-Man movie to add to the huge catalog of great Spider-Man films, including last year's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And it also gave us one of the most accurately depicted supervillains Marvel Studio has ever written for. I mean, they perfectly nailed Mysterio in this movie, despite the trailers being so misleading. I loved him and the rest of the cast of this movie. The movie also includes probably my favorite mid-credits scene I've seen all year. In fact, it includes one of my favorite mid-credits scene I have ever seen in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, well done, writers, for that scene. That was brilliant. Number 7, How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. Honestly, I didn't really like the second How to Train Your Dragon movie that much. I thought it was completely overrated, very predictable, and not nearly as good as the first film, unlike the opinions and reviews of a lot of other fans and critics. So I didn't have high expectations for this third installment of the trilogy, especially since the trailers revealed way too much information. But despite all of this, and despite the huge bacchanal of predictable moments, I saw coming a mile away. This story's focus on the relationship between Hiccup and Toothless after the years of changes that both characters have been through, and the film's focus on the relationship between Hiccup and Astrid, which I personally thought was horribly ignored in the second How to Train Your Dragon movie, really set this movie apart from the other films while also paying homage and making us remember why we love the first How to Train Your Dragon movie so much. This movie was a perfect conclusion to the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy, while at the same time had some of the most heartwarming moments of the entire trilogy. Now for my number 6 movie. Now this is definitely going to be a bit controversial for a lot of people, but bear with me. My number 6 film is It Chapter 2. This was personally my favorite horror film of the entire year for many reasons, but if I had to simplify it, It Chapter 2 fixed so many of the issues I had with the first It movie while giving us a wildly entertaining and emotionally powerful yet heartwarming conclusion to one of Stephen King's greatest stories. Not to mention wonderful performances from both the adult and the child actors of this film, and some of the funniest moments I have ever seen in a horror movie. This movie really plays to the strengths of a lot of the comedic actors that were hired for this movie, but it doesn't stop this from being an unbelievably terrifying and just plain creepy horror movie. I really felt like It Chapter 2 deserved better reviews than what it got and was truly the best horror movie of the year. Number 5, yet another controversial film on this list, Batman vs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now this wasn't an in-theater release, this was actually a straight-to-DVD film release from DC Animation. As a longtime Batman and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan, I had high hopes for this movie crossover, but I was not expecting the perfect blend of Batman and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles mayhem, which is exactly what we got. Yes, the story is ridiculously predictable. I mean, if you know anything about the Shredder or Ra's al Ghul, you can basically figure out the story a mile away. But the dialogue, the fantastic performances, and the pure craziness of this story is spot on with both the Batman and TMNT brands, which is more than I could have ever imagined for such a small 2D animated DC animated film. From minute 1 to literally the end credits scene, this movie put a smile on my face. This is one of the most purely enjoyable movies I have seen all year. The number 4 film on this list is Longshot, starring Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron. Possibly, Longshot is one of the best rom-coms I have ever seen. Longshot gives audiences the rom-com duo we never knew we wanted with Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron, and all the craziness of that scenario. That rom-com is very heartwarming but also hilarious, but they also snagged in a surprisingly poignant yet very easy to understand story about the corruption of environmental politics, making The Longshot truly a complete original. This movie is just one of the best comedies I've seen all year, and a must-watch for anybody who loves the rom-com genre. I personally do not like the rom-com genre, and I can honestly say Longshot was spectacular. The number 3 movie on this list is personally one of the best movies I've seen all year, which is Rocketman. Probably the movie I was most surprised by this year. Rocketman, I was very concerned about after the success of Bohemian Rhapsody, because I was worried that this film was going to amount to nothing more than a good copy of Bohemian. But boy was I wrong. Rocketman, instead of focusing on the musical process of Elton John's legendary catalog, much like Bohemian Rhapsody did with Freddie Mercury and Queen's catalog, the movie uses Elton John's music as the background to tell his story. The movie focuses on Elton John's very difficult childhood and incredibly dangerous and difficult adult lifestyle due to the years of psychological abuse and self-hatred. This movie is essentially the story of one man's struggle against drug and alcohol addiction due to his incredibly awful childhood. But in the end of the day, it's about Elton John's struggle with self-hatred and depression, and him accepting that the problems in his life are his own, and that the only way he can make a change is if he accepts his past and forgive everything. Forgive his past, forgive his present, so he can have a better future. This movie struck a huge chord with me, just like it did with many other audiences and critics. And also, personally, it had me in tears, especially with the ending. This movie shocked me on so many levels by being one of the best dramas, nay, the best drama I have seen all year. Not to mention the fact that this movie has wonderful performances from Taron Egerton, Bryce Dallas Howard, Jamie Bell, and the rest of the cast. This is a must-see for anybody who loves the drama genre. Number 2 on this list is definitely a movie I was not expecting to make my top 3 list, although I kind of thought it might make my top 10 list, which was Toy Story 4. In a year filled with great conclusions, Toy Story 4 is definitely the film to hit home the most. I had such low expectations for this movie, which I expected to be the biggest, most awful cash grab of 2019. And was so happy to find out that Toy Story 4 was yet another great conclusion to the greatest animated film saga in history. The movie was funny, heartwarming, tear-jerking, and had yet another powerful message that hit home with audiences of all ages. Toy Story 4 is probably one of the biggest shocks I have had all year. This movie was brilliant and is a complete shoo-in for Best Animated Picture. I really cannot wait to see what Pixar comes up with next after this surprise hit. And now for my number 1 film. No surprise here. This is probably going to end up on the top 5 list of a lot of other people's lists. My number 1 favorite movie of 2019 is Avengers Endgame. If somebody had told me 10 years ago that over 20 superheroes from over 22 different movies would be crossing over for 2 superhero movies, let alone 1, that would end an 11-year-long interconnected story, I wouldn't have believed it. In fact, nobody would have believed it because 10 years ago, that was impossible. This had never been done before. But Marvel Studios just did it. And they did it spectacularly. Avengers Endgame is truly one of the best movies of the entire year. A fantastic end to one of the longest film sagas in history. To one of the longest stories in film history. And it doesn't stop there. This movie hits all the right emotional beats, has brilliant performances from beginning to end, has some of the best action, visual effects, sound effects, music score, direction, everything. I mean, don't get me wrong, this movie has its flaws. The story has quite a few plot holes, which I would be ridiculous to overlook. But despite all of this, this movie was so freaking good and ended up having some of the best moments of the entire year for cinema. This movie, it deserves so much more than just technical awards for the award seasons this year. This movie made film history, not just in the box office and for Marvel Studios. It made film history for the people that actually care about movies. The fans, the audiences. That's the whole reason movies were made. And it's just a shame that the award seasons, that the Oscars and the Golden Globes are just going to ignore that because it isn't a cinematically well done film. If the people love this movie so much, the people who movies are made for, then it should be recognized at the Oscars and the Golden Globes. Which is why Avengers Endgame is my number 1 favorite movie of the year. And that is my top 10 list. Thank you all for watching this video. Sorry for how long this ended up being, but I mean, this was a top 10 list. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel, and make sure to share this video. I'd love to hear your comments below. What are your top 10 favorite movies of the year? I'd love to hear your comments, and I hope to comment back. Until my next video, see you next time, everybody, and have a happy new year.